we can all agree that it went quite well. And if you allow me to add, rather unexpectedly, if we had that discussion 1 month before, I would say it would not be an easy summit. In the end of the day, it was an easy summit with a very clear communiqué, one of the shortest I have ever seen, quite clear.
That's merciful, to be sure.
That's merciful, yes. If you have to read it all and look at its language, what it may mean, you're so right. And all allies have agreed to raise spending at 3.5 plus 1.5. Also, there was an overall understanding of the challenges that the alliance is facing. So I would like to say as a final remark, keeping it short, it went quite well.
Okay, and the critical decision was this spending on defense, as you say, and there was some skepticism expressed by Mike Pompeo earlier on as to whether this number will really be achieved. How can Europe assure the world and assure itself that this is going to be actually a meaningful target, especially in the light of previous experience? One thinks of the original 2% target, which was widely ignored for a long time, not by Greece, I hasten to add, but...
No. Greece has always been a substantial spender for issues of our own security, I have to say. But let's agree on one thing. If we were sitting on this same position 1 year ago, and we were discussing that all NATO countries unanimously will agree to go to 3.5 plus 1.5, no, they will take us under medical care almost immediately. So it was a huge step for NATO, and a huge understanding that Europe has to pay and for its own defense. So having said that, of course, challenges still exist. We don't know if all the countries will go up to 3.5%, let alone the plus 1.5%. We don't know what kind of equipment are going to be bought, because there's another big question, not how much you spend, but how you spend it. Okay. What systems, how innovation works, how artificial intelligence is being incorporated, how structures are being reformed. But having said that, yet again, it's a huge step.
And what would be your priorities within that context for the spending? How would you rank, if you were to say, let's say, 3 things that you think Europe needs to, or NATO Europe needs to focus on to make the most of this, what must be considered a moment of opportunity for defense?
Let me be frank. I cannot pick 3 because there are many things that have to change in European defense. We have to modernize. I'm afraid to say that most of our armies live in another era, and they're ready for another kind of fight. They're not ready for what's happening right now in Ukraine or what's happening in other fronts of the world. So we have to bring innovation in, we have to bring artificial intelligences, we have to train our soldiers in a different kind of warfare. We have to incorporate totally different systems, and also we have to learn something that is very difficult for the armed forces, to be able to change on the way, to change as they fight.
The metabolism has to change, in effect.
So the whole culture of a very strict mechanism that follows orders from above, it's something that has to change. So that means that the structure has to change also. Much more power has to be given, not necessarily to the senior people, but also to much junior officers in the armed forces.
And is this something you're doing in Greece?
Oh, yes, we are.
So how does that work here?
Well, we have proclaimed at least 17, 18 months ago a new approach, a total reform of the Greek armed forces, which we call Agenda 2030. And I have to honestly say that what is being said in Europe now is something that we were proclaiming in Greece 18 months ago. Well, 18 months ago.
I mean, one sees it in action in Ukraine, for example, this innovation, constant innovation.
That is, in Ukraine, what we see in Ukraine really verifies that unless we change, we will not be able to compete. It is so clear. It is movement by necessity. Yeah. So, for example, the usual approach of armed forces is to buy equipment and stockpile it. That does not function anymore. If you buy 1 million drones and you put it in storage and you try to use it after 2 years, they will be so outdated that they'll be useless. Better throw them away. Yeah. What you have to do is create an approach in which, through 3D printers, very close to the front, you can produce solutions to the challenges you are going to be facing at that very moment. And also changing the software, changing the understanding, changing the system. So this is a totally new approach.
So we hear a lot about the need for Europe to rationalize its defense industry. Too much national, small producers need to be much more integrated. What would that involve for Greece in terms of things that it would do differently in an integrated European defense industry?
For us, the important thing is to participate in this new reality. We're not a big country, so we cannot produce big platforms by ourselves. I mean, Greece does not believe that it could produce the sixth-generation aircraft by itself. I mean, we're not shooting above our weight. At the same time, there are lots that we can offer in the new day of European defense. And what we can offer is innovation. We have exemplary scientists in a very small, but I have to say of great potential defense ecosystem, which, being incorporated in a much bigger European ecosystem, can offer a lot.
Okay, I want to touch on a couple of the sort of more sensitive areas, maybe. We heard this morning Dora Bakoyannis talk about Turkey and defense spending, European defense money going to potentially to Turkey. This is something I believe you've talked about as well. So how do you see that question in this era of increased defense spending and cooperation?
Well, first of all, let us say the obvious. Turkey is an ally. I call them Turkey because President Erdogan wants to, and in Greek is Turkey anyway, so Turkey is an ally in NATO. On the other hand, Turkey still has a casus belli against Greece. So for us, it's binary. We would like Turkey to be treated as an ally. On the other hand, we see Turkey clearly as a country that has issued a casus belli against us. So for us, strengthening their defense industry without clear commitment from Turkey that they will change their approach towards Greece, well, it's a problem.
And what can you do about it within NATO? I mean, you can speak up about it, but do you have a veto on these things, or is it a...
NATO is an alliance against third parties.
Yes.
It's not an alliance protecting its own...
So that's the point. If they
members.
decide to spend a certain amount of investment in Turkey, which you disapprove of, what can you do?
Well, if there's nothing we can do, and there's nothing we will do, if Turkey invests in its defense industry or does bilateral projects with any country. There's nothing we can do, and there's nothing we should do. Our main problem is if European money of the European Union, is spent in a way that directly or indirectly threatens Greece's defense.
Yes.
We're perfectly willing to go forward.
And can you influence that? Technically, in the way, do you have any sort of veto on that?
I think we can. It's not a question of veto power. Yeah. No, the European Union does not work by veto powers. It works mostly by consensus. And I think our friends and partners within the European Union will understand the oxymoron of financing a weapon that could be turned against one of the partners of the European family.
Yeah. Another difficult topic at the moment is the relationship with the United States. Greece has historically had an incredibly close defense cooperation. Yes. You have the facilities at Alexandroupolis, you have Sudabe. So how do you see the state of play in an era where from time to time America's commitment to the alliance is put in question?
Just one initial observation, which it came out natural, as you said. You mentioned Alexandroupolis before Suda. Yeah. That tells something about what my government has done in signing the MDCA with the United States, which brought Alexandroupolis in the map, and now it goes even before Suda when we speak about it. No. We have a very good relation with the United States, regardless of the United States administration. We had a very good relation with Trump 1 administration. Mike Pompeo was the one that signed with me the first MDCA. I'm very happy that I'm going to see him right afterwards. Mm-hmm. Again, we had a good relation with the Biden administration, and I hope we're going to have an excellent relation with Trump too. Greece is an ally of the United States. We share similar concerns, and I believe that that is going to be the case in the future. We're also users of American equipment. We're buying F-35, for example, which, by the way, is the best plane in its category, the fifth-generation plane. So we're very close to the United States, and we will continue being so.
So when there are questions over America's commitment to Article 5, you think that's just noises off, you don't have to worry too much about it?
Well, I don't think we are threatened from a source that this is applicable to us.
Okay. All right. Can I ask you about Iran and the, well, perhaps the broader Middle East, the lessons that you draw from a defense perspective on the, we talked a little bit just now about Ukraine and lessons from Ukraine, but we're also seeing a military conflict, which I'm sure everyone is drawing, paying very close attention to from a strategic...
It's a school.
A school, okay. A university even. What are you drawing from this in terms of missile defense, in terms of the need to have adequate stockpiles of various types of weapons?
It may sound a little arrogant, but we have anticipated the era in which this kind of warfare will take place. So we have planned for a holistic approach. We call it as Chile's shield, because it's multi-layered, which will protect the country holistically from missiles, from airplanes, and from drones. And that's what we're doing, and that's what will happen in the next years.
But do you have anything equivalent to the Israeli protection against missiles, or would you be more vulnerable?
Not currently, but we will in a matter of months rather than decades.
So is this affecting your investment plans, or the investment plans were already in place?
Shield is a big part of our approach towards the equipment the armed forces are going to use. We have, for this government, for the first time in Greek history, has issued a 12+8, that means a 20-year plan on the equipment is going to purchase or create. And the anti-missile defense is a part of that approach.
Okay. So what, at the moment, out of at a period where Europe is investing more heavily, where you say there are these schools for learning strategic lessons happening in Ukraine, in the Middle East, what is currently your biggest priority in terms of the next phase of Greek strategic defense preparedness?
Well, I will repeat myself. It is the Achilles heel. Achilles heel. Yes, it's holistic.
Yeah.
It incorporates everything underneath, be it the army, being the air force, being the navy, being the air defense, and we are modernizing practically everything. Even we're changing the structure of armed forces. We're changing our navy. We're buying new frigates from France, 4 new frigates, which I believe are state-of-the-art. We're buying 2 used frigates from Italy. We're modernizing the rest of our frigates fleet. Practically, we are changing everything.
And you say, of course, Turkey has been the factor which has meant that Greek defense spending has consistently been well above the NATO
well, everybody knows
minimum.
Denying it makes no sense.
No, sure. Does this new target have implications for Greece as well to increase spending, or are you already at a level where you can say we don't have to have a different trajectory because of the NATO?
We're not going to raise our expenses dramatically. First of all,
where are you at the moment in terms of percentage?
3.1, 3.2, which is I think is enough. Well, Turkey spends much more than we are, but we're much smaller. And anyway, we are on our priorities is just defending. We're not an aggressor. Yeah. So you see, this creates economies of scale. We're not planning to attack anybody. Having said that, again, we have to modernize, and the priority is the Achilles heel, this new holistic approach.
Okay. Last question, because we're running out of time. If you were to have one message to your fellow NATO defense minister colleagues about the next period of implementing the decision reached at the summit, what would it be?
Spend cleverly.
Spend cleverly. Okay.
Because we run the danger of creating inflation and buy worse with more money. So we have to be wise. And also we have to reform the structure. Buying new weapons, new systems, without changing the structure, without changing the system, without changing the approach, without changing the culture, does not make sense. NATO has to reform, and especially European army has to reform. Because, for years, nobody in Europe, I'm not including Greece, for reasons we touched upon before, but Europe did not believe that war may come back in the continent. Yeah. But unfortunately, that is the case as we speak.
I think that will feed very well into the next part of this conversation, but that's all we have time for this bit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.